Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, Monica.
So I want to let everybody know that Jennifer is coming back soon. I know I did two interviews without her, but she's been everywhere, right, Jen? You've just been swamped, which
Yes.
is great. Like busy is good. You've got tons of business people are getting you to speak and having you do walks, and you're all over the place. But I got to have this amazing guest, and I cannot wait to share this conversation with you, our listeners, and you, Jen.
Yes, Monica. I promise I'll be back, and I'm now back home. So I'm really excited for this one because today we're talking about regenerative agriculture. Back at the start of season 5, we mentioned that this was a topic we really wanted to explore more, and I can't think of a better guy than Kelsey Timmerman to help us dive right in.
So, for those of you who don't know, Kelsey is the author of several best selling books. He wrote Where Am I Wearing? Where Am I Eating? And Where Am I Giving? And you can get a sense of what that might be. His newest book is Regenerating Earth Farmers Working with Nature to Feed Our Future. It's really powerful, full of stories from farmers, indigenous leaders, activists who are reimagining our food systems in ways that obviously we love, healing the soil, restoring
Mhm.
ecosystems, and really bringing communities closer together.
And I have to mention, the book itself is absolutely gorgeous. Patagonia published it. And yes, they publish books, in case we didn't know that. And it's filled with truly stunning photography. But more than that, it really paints such a hopeful picture, which we love, of what's really possible when we work with nature instead of against it. And that's, of course, what we're all about.
Exactly. So I love talking with Kelsey because while this is a global story, it's also a very personal one for him. He grew up in rural Ohio and he now lives in rural Indiana. So he's very much a witness firsthand of how industrial farming has been in his backyard, shaped the land and the lives, I should say, of the people around him. So that perspective makes this conversation so much richer. And it's something we talk about quite a bit in our conversation, Jen.
Absolutely. Okay, so with that, let's go to our conversation with Kelsey Timmerman.
Kelsey, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Muncie, Indiana.
And I love your backdrop. You were on your screen porch, which, as we were saying before we got on, is very on brand for both of us, really, for regenerating Earth and for Biophilic Solutions.
Yeah, there's actually no screen, so a bird could slam into my
Okay,
head at
fly
any
in.
point in time, can make it
Okay, great.
exciting. Yeah, but behind me is like what used to be a pond, but now is a swamp, more
I'm
or
sorry.
less. So
I guess, well,
it's
it's
actually
still
really nice. Lots of
it's
awesome sounds this time of year, and
wildlife.
lots of frogs in the springtime, insects this time of year. So it's actually
Good.
nice. Hopefully the beaver will come back, and then it'll be a pond again.
Okay, wonderful. We'll look
It's a
forward to
long
that.
story. I won't get into it.
No, well, maybe we'll dig into it. So, your latest book, Regenerating Earth, is really, it's your fourth book, if I believe that's correct.
hmm
And it's really your most personal book yet, it seems like. What drew you sort of into farming and land stewardship after traveling the world and reporting on so many global issues?
Yeah, I'm kind of, maybe it's hard to admit a little, but I'm a product of rural America and I
Hmm.
didn't want to live here. I grew up in rural Ohio and my dad left the farm when he was after high school. He had to work on the family farm. And then, so he was kind of the last Timmerman generation
Yeah.
to farm. And to me, farming just looked like a lot like mowing around here, just mowing corn and soybeans and then mowing the planet and all that stuff. I know there's definitely more to it than that, but I just wanted out. I just wanted to get out of here and
Yeah.
travel. And I studied anthropology in college, and which is about other people, how other people live around the world and throughout time. And I wanted to go some of those places, so I started to travel and eventually, I went to Honduras on a whim because my T-shirt was made there. I bumped into I met a guy who worked in that factory named Amilcar, and um, I had been writing before that, just kind of like my adventures out in the world. And once I met him, it became much more of this look at this. What does it mean to live in a world with such inequality and injustice? And so that became a book called Where Am I Wearing? And then my second book was called Where Am I Eating? Where I went to different places food comes from. So Starbucks coffee in Colombia, Dole banana, Costa Rica, things like that. And I realized that I really love rural areas. I have trouble saying the word rural too. So
Rural.
just if you get that, I'm trying to R plus Earl, rural. I did the audiobook too. So I apologize to all the
Okay.
mispronounced
Nope.
rurals in there. So yeah, I I found myself liking the countrysides more and relating to the people more, and kind of came to terms with my own, country roots. And my wife and I, we moved out of a suburb, kind of a suburban neighborhood in Muncie. Muncie's basically a suburb of Indianapolis to some extent. And so we moved out into 20 acres and of a woods and a swamp and other things. And now I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. For me, the book idea came about with this. I had lost hope in the like that farming was part of a solution. That seemed like more of the issue of our times in our area that a lot of people suffer from, even the farmers themselves, most especially the farmers themselves. And so I heard about regenerative agriculture, and I was like, okay, this could be a solution that could not only just make a difference in my rural community, which is kind of eroding away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of opportunities and in terms of literal the land going away, and also help people I've met around the world that are trying to make a living as farmers.
Yeah. Our audience is pretty familiar with regenerative ag, but will you just define it for us just so as we're sort of setting the table here for the conversation?
Yeah, I mean the definition is squishy. Like it means different things to different people. All of the greatest degenerators, I think, in terms of like agrochemical companies or commodity traders, like Cargill, which is one of the most responsible companies for tearing down the Amazon. They have a definition of regenerative agriculture. Monsanto has a definition of regenerative agriculture. So it is kind of squishy. I think just it should be basic in terms of is are you farming in a way that makes a place better
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
the life below in the soil and the life on it, including people. To me, that's like a very like clear definition. Now people will try to measure that in different ways, but when it comes to people trying to say this is exactly what regenerative agriculture is, I think I have two new things to add to it. I'll kind of share like the basics of the other ones, like you're using fewer chemicals or no chemicals, plowing little to no plowing,
Mm-hmm.
putting animals and incorporating animals back onto the land, embracing the diversity that exists and harnessing the power of that diversity to produce and to protect plants from pests and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then having like a perennial, looking at least including perennials in some way, so like a perennial food forest or perennial crops of some fashion, and then those help keep a living root in the ground, which holds more water than in the soil, and it also has the thing that most people I think come to regenerative agriculture from that sequesters carbon through those roots if you're doing it in the right way. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the kind of the general. I think what my experiences have added is that many of the farmers that I met, the regenerative farmers I met, have a belief that humans can be a force of good. In many ways, we've kind of lost that. I've lost it at times, certainly. I just think about our negative impact,
Mm-hmm.
but they believe that we can actually do good and make this place better and undo the damage, some of the damage that we have done. And it could be a net good. The last aspect I think I add, and other people have said similar things too, but regenerative agriculture isn't a new thing, which sometimes we're led to believe that. It's an exciting old thing that indigenous and traditional communities have practiced for a long time. But even the farmers I met that don't come from that background, whether it's Will Harris in Georgia or it's Carmen Fernholz in Western Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
they talk about the land in a almost spiritual way, although they might not come from a tradition that has the vocabulary for it. And the people are getting excited about it as they're experiencing the land and what can happen as it kind of comes back,
Mm-hmm.
and that like helps them start to grow some roots, because I think in general we're sort of rootless when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
our farming background, which we've always been tied to the land through what we eat. It's kind of separate now, and just our ancestry.
Yeah. No, we are so disconnected from the land, from nature, animals, insects. And somehow there's so many reasons probably why. And I think the rural is really fascinating too, because again, for a lot of reasons, but we know that a lot of big companies, big ag companies have come in and bought up a lot of the land in the rural areas. And so we have these monopolies and monoculture crop farming, which has been really subsidized by the government. And then we end up exporting some of that stuff or turning into something that we put it into our gasoline. All these things that we do with corn and soybeans, these crops that we don't really eat, they're used for something else. And then you grew up in a rural area. You decided to leave because you probably didn't feel like there was anything there for you because it had been kind of denuded by these corporate monoliths, if you will. And there's a lot of big box stores that were the problem. There was a lot, right, where sort of these main streets got decimated. Then the population leaves, and then the tax base is gone, and then the schools have to close, and the roads can't be fixed. And
It's a
it's a
downward, it just keeps
real,
on spiraling, right?
yeah. And I don't think that people understand, when we've been very much feed the world, which sounds like a very noble, wonderful cause, right? That, but we know that a lot of that food isn't, or that a lot of those crops aren't used as food. But I do think, and we're seeing it, and your work is part of it, that regenerative agriculture can bring back rural communities because you can build a new agrarian economy. So talk a little bit about that. Talk about a little bit about either, what are some of the, we talked to like some of the wisdoms of the traditions. I think Will Harris is an amazing example of bringing a whole town back to life. And I'm not familiar with Carmen, but I'm sure there's a story there too. But tell us a little bit about, what do you think farmers most need to hear today of why we need to go in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, it's easy to I think sometimes we blame them. We expect them to be the solution and the cause of also the cause of the like we put too much on farmers who like I'm surrounded by corn and soybeans. I
Well,
have
and I don't even want to disparage the monopolies. I mean, we understand how we got there, but those are farmers. They are
yeah,
doing great work. It's just that we need a diversity
yeah.
of
And,
types of farms.
Will Harris is a great example to kind of show up how we've got where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Like he tells a story that his dad, had cattle as a rancher, just like Will is. Someone came out and dumped a fertilizer salesperson came out and dumped fertilizer on the ground and said, "Hey, come back and check this out in a couple of days." And like, wow, boy, howdy, it's greener, it's more lush. Like that's money in the pocket, money in the bank. So let's do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense why my grandfather, while Will's father, like stepped onto this treadmill of a
Mm.
system that is literally at times poisoning them, degrading their farms, which most of them I think will admit to that. Like, is the soil as good now as it was when you were a kid? No, it's not. We
Mm-mm.
can't farm that
Yeah.
section anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Require even more inputs to farm. So it makes sense that how they got to where they are. And many of them, like Will, are adopting the practices of their fathers or grandfathers who stepped onto that treadmill. So
Mm-hmm.
they're like in this system, they're the best at what they do in this system. They're trying to make a go of it. Half the years they lose money. And it's tough. If it weren't for the price of farmland going up, I don't think most of them would be able to stay in it.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I mean, there's still a lot of knowledge there because their roots to the land have not been broken.
Mm-hmm.
There's family lineage of maybe having some animals or grandma's garden. Like they're more likely to have that. So, I mean, I do think they can be the leaders of this. And looking
Mm-hmm.
to indigenous and traditional communities, there are definitely some lessons. So I traveled to Northern Colombia and spent time with Arhuaco. This is my second time going there. The first time I was researching fair trade coffee, and the kind of the Spanish speaking farmers the Arhuaco work with wanted to grow more. Like, hey, we're making a lot of money, on growing coffee on your land. Let's build some better roads and let's grow more coffee. And they're like, pump the brakes. This is enough. We're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of when is enough, like always be
Yeah.
growing,
Yep.
leads to forest in my county here behind me, like getting like chopped down every single year.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. So the Arhuaco, when I visited this last time to have them teach me about some of their what would basically be regenerative practices, although they wouldn't call them that. They farming with nature, not farming with the cycles of nature. They definitely do that. They just set me down in the woods multiple times in the jungle. I got eaten alive by bugs, and they didn't. They weren't getting bit by bugs, just me. I think the mountains were taking a blood test to see if I was worthy, but they said this is the time. I was arrived at the time of year where that's what they do, though. They ask permission, and I'm not saying like my neighbor has to go sit in the forest and ask permission, but the intentionality behind that,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what this land wants, in
Mm-hmm.
many ways has been taken away from our farmers that surround me because
Mm-hmm.
they're just prescribed,
Yeah.
like, plant this, this number of seeds in this space, in this row, come and spray it by this time. If you don't plant it by that time, we're not going to give you this support. You know, there's all sorts of, they have to follow this prescription, and it's less of a need to even know the land. My grandpa drove in an open air tractor. If he was harvesting some weeds, all of a sudden he could smell it. Now you're got your flip flops on, you're listening to a podcast, and it's being driven by satellite. Like it's a lot different. So we've just become more and more distant from
Mm-hmm.
the land.
Yeah. Well, and it's like all the efficiencies, right? So it takes one guy in the, hermetically sealed tractor to farm, I don't know how many acres when it used to take more. So that, there's a lot of like pros, but the reason we can do it is all of everything that's going on here. So, one of the things that you talk about, and we've sort of touched on so far, is like American farmers are really squeezed by this system, right? It farms the farmer, right? And so like when you're talking to farmers in your community or other maybe US farmers, where do they sit? Like what are their hopes and fears for the future? I mean, and obviously today is a whole nother situation, the political climate and I mean, I'm seeing pictures of strawberries just left in the
Yeah, the
fields and
tariffs
crops
and
going.
are
I
a
mean, it's just, I
problem.
don't even understand. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't even know how to
immigration.
unravel
Yeah.
that. But what are you hearing from farmers? What are they worried about, and what would they like to do?
Well, it's interesting. So, like in the book, I have lots of farm family and friends, and so I thought I definitely want to include them in the book and talk to them about these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I arranged to visit one of my friends as he was planting soybeans, and he was on we were on the same basketball team in high school together. And like my mom went to school with his dad, like our grandparents probably went to school together because that's kind of how it is. And he's like, my wife really doesn't want me to talk to you about this. And so we talked. I was like, I can make it like anonymous, like. And so I had multiple of like very childhood friends of mine who
Yeah.
did not want to be named in the book. So like if you talk to people in kind of a public setting, they wouldn't be as critical of the system as they are privately.
Yeah.
So when I was bouncing around that tractor with my high school teammate, he was a great power forward. He sees a future in which the large like corporations are going to just take it over, and like the people that are actually working the land aren't going to be people who own it at all. It's just going to be employees. So even like that's lengthens the disconnect
Yeah.
from the land when you're just like, okay, here's where you're going in this state today, or go to this county today, and they might see that plot of land one time. So he's worried about that. He worries about if his children are going to have a future on the farm. Another friend whose father passed away a few years ago, like he talks about, was it because his dad was doused in chemicals that one time that he died of this type of cancer?
Right.
And there are many farmers dying way too young. The average age of a farmer is 57, but I know of a lot of farmers who die in their 50s, from exposure, like in their 50s, early 60s, that die of a cancer that may have been caused by their exposure to chemicals. So they'll also talk about that
Yeah.
privately.
I know.
Yeah. So
It,
one of the things, the power forward, I was riding around with his tractor. He actually used to work for one of these big agrochemical companies. The while researching this book, he was like, I think he had to like let go a bunch of people. Then he himself was fired, and he's like, "Hey, I think that Bayer doesn't really care about people." And I'm
mm,
like, Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard not to see the agrochemical companies. I don't say it so much in the book because I kind of want people to come to their own conclusions.
Of course.
Like that, they're evil. Like, if you're suing the island of Kauai because your company wants to spray chemicals, unknown chemicals at whatever quantity, whatever time, next to schools,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to say it. Like, that's evil.
Yeah. And I think so much of it comes from, I think to your point earlier, a disconnect from the land. So they don't have any understanding of what that soil needs to look like and be filled with the good things in order for the vegetables to have the vitamins that we need. Because if the soil is totally denuded of any life and it's really more like dirt rather than soil, and we know that's terrible for on a number of levels, even just in droughts, it won't hold the water, but it doesn't have any nutrients. And then that carrot or soybean or whatever doesn't have any nutrients. And then when it goes into our body, it's not really doing much. I'm sure it's better than Cheetos, you know so
Yeah.
I just think we've lost the thread, and I can totally see how your other books sort of got you here. Tell me, you know it sounds like there are farmers out there, and I know them that are looking for that, their grandparents or indigenous wisdom. But tell me, like, what are you hearing from, like, consumers, like the general public on this when they read this book? Does it open their eyes, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of start from this perspective as we're eaters, and that means we're literally consumers. So, how can I
Mhm.
consume better?
Yep.
And they want to maybe connect with a local farmer, but other than the farmer's market, they're not sure. And at the farmer's market, is the farmer even, the person that grew the food? Sometimes we don't know. There's a really great Regeneration International on their website, has something called the farm map. It's on their homepage.
Hmm.
So you click that and you can find regenerative farms near you. I think
Oh,
that's a
that's
really
great.
good way as a
Oh, that's
consumer.
great.
And
We'll
and
put
they're
a link
Okay, great.
to
And
that.
I think they're kind of like self-identified regenerative farms. But if you like look at their website, if they have one, they might not have one. If you send them a text or call or email and say, "Hey, I'd love to come out and visit your farm and meet the people who maybe you'll buy your meat from, or see the vegetables or the fruit that is being grown." And that's a really great way for us as consumers to kind of connect. Obviously, in certifications too, there's the regenerative
Hmm.
organic certification
Yep.
that Rodale was a big part of, and so was Patagonia too. They're the publisher of my book. They didn't like barely even mention that certification in the book. I think they would have not wanted me to, just because it's too close to home. Um,
Okay.
so there's that certification. There's the Real Organic Project. I think is doing some neat things, but certification is just in place of a relationship.
Hmm.
So if you can have a relationship with the people growing your food, I mean, all the better. I just ate lunch and I ate burger from a farmer that's converting corn and soybeans to pasture, and I ate a peach from the guy who owns a local landscaping company and has peaches in his yard. That's kind of stuff. And I'm not wholly that way. I'm still in this system, not
It's hard not to
buying.
be. I was just going to say transitional farmers are also great to think about, right? And again, it's like it's very difficult. We as a society want to be like, this is good and this is bad, and I think there's definitely um both in this system, and I think we need to point that out and recognize that and support the good. But I also think there's farmers that have been, I guess, pulled into the system who start to recognize that it's really not great for the soil. It's not great for the animals. It's not great for the people who want to move themselves back out. And they're doing transitional, which is really great. And there's some cool company, big box companies, big, like Kashi for a while I don't know if they're still was doing a really cool project with transitional farmers, because everybody needs a marketplace. If nobody's going to buy it, they can't flourish. So we have to figure out as consumers, how do we support the people doing great stuff? And I love your point about it doesn't certifications are great, and we should totally support them. But if you're just using smart practices and natural process, even though you don't have a certification, we should be supporting that farmer. And even just if it's local. right? And they're just not spraying chemicals. We should be supporting that farmers. I think we also get, and I say we, the bigger consumer, start to be told it has to be this, it has to be organic. And it's like, yes, there are certain things that are, if they are sprayed, have more of a problem, right? Different, I think, strawberries and blueberries, but like a banana, I don't know. I mean, it's like packaged up. But, or if we wash them, it takes the chemicals off them. I think the bigger thing is the vitamins inside. I think we need to be realizing that a lot of times if things aren't natural and organic, if the soil isn't good, we're not getting the nutrition that we need.
Yes, studies have definitely shown that. That's not my area of expertise, but I've mentioned that in the book and point to a study that found that there's more nutrients
Yeah,
in food
Rodale's
that
done a
is,
ton of great work on that.
yeah.
So that's
In the
exciting.
terms of the transition, like for the official USDA organic certification, I think you have to go 3 years without spraying any chemicals that are like not allowed. And so that is a time where they often can see their yields go down. There are some people challenging whether that's true or not. There's a really great farmer, a thought leader. His name's John Kempf. He's an Amish from Amish community in Ohio, and he talks about like using like he's seen farmers being able to turn the land around much faster than 3 years if they're
Okay.
using certain farming practices. I
That's
will touch
great.
on one thing too about like you know, when we talk about eating organic or eating clean for our own bodies, like that's a direct like consuming of the things that can make us healthy or things that can make us sick. But there's also kind of the cost that is paid by our rivers and our air and our water and the
Mm,
farm workers. So like a banana is a specific one too. Like, should I buy organic banana? Like, you're right. You don't eat the wrapper that's subsumed where the stuff is sprayed on. But there's also the rivers and
mm.
workers in Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador who are not exposed to as many chemicals if they're grown with organic. So I think if we're trying to take like a bigger view of things, which needs to happen, and we're all responsible for this as well, it's not just the farmers. Then we think about, we're running out of soil because it's washing away down the river faster,
Mm-hmm.
40 times faster than it can be regenerated with our current system. Our air and water are at risk, which then affects our health. Like it all kind of comes back to us at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I bring up the health factor because we found, and there's studies of this too, but we understand that when you make it really personal for you or your family, that's when people start to care and change behaviors. But I
Yeah.
do agree with you. And I think bringing people into the regenerative concept and animals, that the farmers and the workers on those farms need to be treated fairly and they need to be paid fairly. That is part of regenerative philosophy. And then the animals need to be treated well. And that's part of the regenerative philosophy. So I think really thinking about every single one of those things, us, the animals, the land, the water, the people, they're all part of nature. And we forget that, right? Because we think nature's this thing out there, it's this thing behind you, but you're sitting in it, you're
Yeah.
experiencing it.
There's a really great Instagram account called, I think it's called, oh, I can't remember what it's called. Cultivating, I forget what it's called. Anyhow, I'll remember and I'll
Okay.
point you to it. You can link
Yeah.
to the show notes. But they had a really great post that said that we aren't fighting nature. We are nature that fights.
Ooh, I like that.
Like, because I use also this like idea, and I've made it a big case for the book being called "We Are Earth," and then it got shot down, and it was lots of titles. But that's kind of really I want to get to that like connection that we have with
Yeah.
the place and people and the how the microbiotic life in the soil, like we're connected with all of these things. And but I really love the way they put it. We are nature fighting. So it's like
I
we're
love
just not
that.
like things aren't just happening to us. Like we are actually working and active and in relationship with the place to try to make it better.
Yeah, and I think we can make those small differences by supporting the guy with the peaches or going to the farmer's market or even, in the grocery store now you have organic choices. And so the more we support those farmers and people and share the word and buy your book, the more we can help the broader system. So now after this journey of writing the book, it just came out this summer, right? Or it was 25, right?
Yeah, it came out
Yep.
in like May or something.
You're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, when did it
I
come
don't
out?"
even know.
I
Yeah.
know, you're like, "Ah, whirlwind." So the book just came out this summer, and so you've had this process of writing a book, which I know is like a substantial effort, and then getting it out there, and then it doesn't end. What gives you the most hope? With regenerative agriculture and sort of how we can truly feed the future, feed the people, feed the earth.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things. I mean, I thought this could be a really depressing journey, and to see people that are actively out there making a difference. And I'll share a story that seems really depressing at first, but I think can be inspiring. When I was in Kenya, this young woman named Celestine worked with farmers to like widows in the community have been hit by HIV/AIDS really heavily. So there was a lot of widows, and she worked with them to make community gardens that that maybe they're grandparents or parents used to do, but now they've kind of lost that because they've bought onto our way of agriculture that has been exported, and often they're offered modern seed and fertilizer on loan, and that they do have to pay back to a nonprofit. And so one of the people that Celestine introduced me to, she had 5 bags of rice in the corner of her house, and 4 of them, she was going to sell 4 of them and still be $16 in debt to and like, it was like worth 88, the loan was like $88, so,
Right.
or something like that. So we're not talking big numbers here, but she was going to sell 4 bags of rice, still be in debt. She was going to eat not rice, this is maize. She was going to eat the 1 bag of maize, and it would last about a month. And then she would, like everyone else, would be out in the market buying, when everybody ran out of maize, she'd be buying it for a more expensive price. So like, they're not getting ahead. And so she's trying to kind of teach them permaculture practices, or really help them remember some of the practices that used to farm and some of the foods that they used to farm. So after being with her, it was just a real awesome experience. And she's like, Kelsey, you need to come back to my village. You need to see sanding. And I'm like, sanding? Like, what is sanding? But I'm like, this isn't what my book is about, but whatever. I'll just go, and because she was nice enough to spend a couple of days with me. So we go to her village, and we walk out of the town into the countryside a little bit. And then it looks like a place has been bombed. There's like a Central Park size area that's just like been caved in. It's nothing but like a canyon, like a sand around. And she said, these are people who have lost hope in the ability to farm, and they've sold their land for the soil, for the sand beneath it. And so they hire, and the people, and it's not like excavators coming in. It's usually neighbors who have not been able to make it farming, going out there with wood hose and scraping the sand and loading up trucks to drive away the sand. And so we're standing there, and like these little pillars, something like you see like Arches National Park. And I'm like, Celestine, what are those pillars? And she's like, those are graves where the home used to be. In this culture, they would bury their loved ones around their home. And so out of respect for the dead, these farmers who may have known the family that's even buried there dig around the graves. In some places you can see bones sticking out and clothes sticking out. So it felt like the end of the world, right? It was like gut wrenching and just made me want to vomit. And then Celestine turned her back on it, faced me, and she's like, told me how excited she is about the work that she is doing, and how there's this growing interest. And so like Celestine, like, this is her community. Like, people that have, in a world where we've lost hope in the soil, like, it's a dying world. Like, sand is death, like soil is life. And if we're just like lost all faith in the soil, like we're in a falling world for sure. But in the face of all that, Celestine, with death at her back, looked to the future and was excited about her work and her practices. And she wants like a community center. And so like, if she is hopeful, how can we not be hopeful? If people who are the Tupinamba who are living in the Amazon, that's kind of being cut down around them, are hopeful about their agroforestry projects they have going on, and harvesting things from the forest in a sustainable way to sell, to pay for their kids to go to college, to become lawyers, to fight for their land. Like, if they have hope, like we need to have hope. And sometimes those of us, we're so disconnected from all of it, but we're just like, sad.
I know.
I get, right?
Right, but sharing those pockets of hope and sharing those really positive stories is what we need, and it's what you're doing, and it's what we like to do because we want to give people hope, and we wanna inspire people that there are ways to feed the future emotionally, mentally, and physically. So, how can we and our listeners support regenerative food systems? Like, what would you recommend? What do you do? I mean, if people want to get involved in some of these people, are there ways to do that to help?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way if we can help support those who are on the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends in Kenya is named Dalmas Tiampati. He's
Mm-hmm.
a Maasai, and he's trying to help his community kind of come together again and
Mm-hmm.
herd their cattle together in a way that like regenerates the land. And so his work is supported through a Facebook community that does fundraiser called Soil for Climate. Soil, the
Okay.
number four, climate.
Great.
The Tupinamba in Brazil are supported by a organization called Health and Happiness Project, and it's
Nice.
like in Portuguese. So I'm not sure if Health and Happiness Project, Brazil, I think should get you there. So
Okay,
yeah, I
we'll
think
find it, and everybody can use Google Translate to.
yeah, yeah. So I do think we can find people like that to support. I think we can be politically engaged as
Mm-hmm.
well, just in our own communities of what's happening. I mean, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
on the larger stage, that can feel so daunting. But one of the things that gave me hope in all this, I was in on the island of Kauai. As I mentioned, this chemical companies were suing for the right to spray next to
Yeah.
schools, and they
Terrible.
wanted to pass a bill that you would have to tell us what you're spraying and when you're spraying. And this island fought back against these agrochemical companies, and now their corn, because there's corn on the island of Kauai, of course, it has have corn everywhere. Their corn footprint has halved, and some of the companies now are leaving and to go to other places maybe. But this island and activists came together and fought some of the biggest corporations on earth, and essentially won. So what's happening in our local community. And in my local community, we fought a hog CAFO like it was going to be built. We fought a steel recycling plant that also was just like burning unknown metals. That had a really bad track record in other communities, and 1,000 people showed up at the courthouse. And
Mm-hmm.
so, be part of those local efforts
Yeah,
to make a difference.
that's
And
great.
behind all of this is our connection with nature.
Yeah.
And the Waco told me, Kelsey, your book, books aren't going to change the world. Experiences will change the world. So maybe, my book or other books can help people go then want to seek out experiences. And maybe that's how it makes a little bit of a difference. Part of that would be like, I've gotten to know my woods better, to sit and to listen and to observe. And in Hawaii, they have a term called kuleana. It's about like you have a responsibility and privilege. And if we look at where we live like that, I think that's something we all need to do. And one of the Native Hawaiian culture practitioners told me, he's like, when we're teaching kids, one of the things we ask them is like, what river do you belong to? So like really belonging to a place and not be like, I own this. This is my river. Like, no, I am of this river. There even get to
Right.
the point where like what were the winds on the day you were born, and many of these other, but they're more deeply rooted of
Yeah.
a culture and tradition than most of us. So I would say beyond just being a consumer, like experience where you live. Like have a favorite tree that you're near and like care about. And maybe it's a local park or maybe it's the tree on your street. Like then you start to care and make choices that will protect that tree. Go paddling on the river. If you can't paddle, go spend time in the river, go swimming in the river. Then you care of what is being put in the river, or that our woods are being torn down right next to the river, and chemicals and soil and nitrates will run off even faster into the rivers. First, we have to like care and rebuild the connection. I think we
Mhm.
have a heart thing
Yeah.
more than we do like you can pencil it out. Oh, well, we do all
Yeah.
these things, we sequester all the carbon and everything's great. But we have to have the change our heart, changes our relationship, which is what I really love about your show here is that you all focus on that quite a bit, that relationship, not
Yeah.
just we did the math. And the math is
Yeah.
important, but
Exactly. And we've recognized through our own experiences and talking to people that, you know, economics matter, in order to get funding, in order to get eyeballs, a lot of times the banks you need to talk in numbers, but numbers are very abstract to all of us. And even carbon, it's a very abstract concept. If I tell you that I just sequestered 100 pounds of CO2, I have no clue what that means. And so it's really, to your point, if I know that that stream has been cleaned, or it's cleaner because we stopped this bad runoff, or we literally pulled stuff out of it, people dump things. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on as we're wrapping up, besides where people can find you and support you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just one last thing is that there's a really beautiful idea from the Awako that plays into this, that they believe they were put on this place that they call the heart of the world. And they believe that if anything negative were to happen in this place, the whole world would fall to pieces. So, like,
Wow.
just to kind of underline what we've been talking about, like, what if we all thought of
Yeah.
where we live like that, and we took that responsibility and had a relationship with that? Like, it was the heart of, so like, this is, I'm sitting in my heart of the world right
I
here,
love
and it's
that.
wild, kind of a wild woods with all sorts of stuff happening. But not too far from this is corn and soybeans. Like, I could maybe throw an aerobie super disc and make it into some, maybe make it into some soybeans. So and just expressing gratitude for all the work that you're doing to kind
Thank
of
you.
open people's hearts and minds to this, and encourage them to have like experiences that then we can have another little, like, flicker of light. I think those flickers of light are growing, and people are getting turned on to this idea of
Mm-hmm.
regeneration, because when you see a place come to life again, like, that's what makes people believers, right? Something's dead and it comes back to life. Like, wow, okay, I want more of this. I want to be a part of this. And
I want to be
so,
part of it. Yeah, well, and your book is just like full of humor and storytelling. And that's also what's really wonderful. It's like not just the reporting that you're doing and all these wonderful places you've gone to, but I think we need to be storytellers, right? Because we need to bring people in, and we need to have humor. We need to not, I mean, it's serious stuff, but it's like, nobody wants to read a downer. They want to read something that's hopeful, and that gives us the hope for the future, and that we can make a difference. And I love the idea of heart of the world, that this is your heart. What is your heart of the world? Just like choosing a river,
yeah.
finding your place. We've joked, like, find a tree, make it your
Yeah,
tree,
right. Have you hugged a
just,
tree before? I know that's
yeah.
kind of weird. And
No,
tree hugger is
but
kind of derogatory term, but like,
I know.
go hug a tree for a minute just to see like what happens. Maybe like the way it smells or the way it's swaying a little bit makes you think and know that tree a little bit more. I've
Yeah.
hugged a tree. It's right over there. I can see.
Right there. Good. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for spending time with us. I love your background. I'm going to request that I should probably get outside myself. It really changes how you feel to see the trees, to see nature. It just makes a huge difference. Get
Yeah.
outside, buy the book, Regenerating Earth, find your local farmer, support them, and support your heart of the world where that is.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that.
Thank you.
Monica, wow. That's all I can say. I just loved that conversation. Kelsey shared so many pearls of wisdom. I mean, after talking with him, what really struck with you?
Well, of course, there's so many things, but the first that came to mind was Kelsey brought up this Hawaiian idea of belonging to a river, and belonging to the land of where you live. And that really hit me as something that we should really think about more, is sort of how our place in nature where we live is so important.
Same. It totally flips our usual idea of ownership. I mean, what if instead of thinking we own the earth, we thought of ourselves as belonging to it? I mean, that shift is beautiful and also so profound.
Exactly. And so, there's this idea of the heart of the world, and that each of us has our own heart of the world. And so, what if we treated our little corners of the earth with that kind of reverence?
Ugh, that is so beautiful, Monica. I love that you just said that. And when it comes to climate change, I mean, we already know the math. We know the solutions. The barrier now is just us. If we don't change our hearts, nothing else will change.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And, that's where it gets tough because there isn't a lot of political will for big systematic changes right now, to say the least. And that's because hearts and minds have to shift first. And it feels like a pretty steep hill, today. But I do think that we're chipping away at it. And Kelsey's book is one example that can really change your heart.
Absolutely. The story Kelsey shared about Celestine at the end, that also really got to me. It was heartbreaking, but also so powerful. His point really landed with me. Often the people who are closest to the land, who experience the devastation firsthand, are the ones who carry the most hope. That really fascinated me. It sounds like a paradox, but it's not, because they still feel agency. They're fighting. When people are disconnected from nature, it can feel disempowering, like they don't even know where to begin or where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, before we wrap up, I do want to circle back to something Kelsey said earlier. It was regenerative agriculture isn't new. It's an exciting old thing. I thought that was great. And I just love that so much. And, the wisdom has always been there and we have to rediscover it. Even though if we've forgotten it, it's still within us and we just have to trust it and sort of fight for it.
That is always so powerful, the idea, this wisdom within us. So very true. We've got tons of resources in the show notes, so definitely check those out. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Bye, Jen.
Bye, Monica.